Hello,
Oh my God.
everyone. Dante, do you want to
Oh,
introduce yourself?
no. Hi, I'm Dante.
Oh,
Uh,
you are?
mhm. Yeah, no, I'm the problem. I'm the reason we are late because I live in Alaska and the internet's terrible. Uh, yes, Dante. I write books for young readers. Uh, Most recently, Message Not Found. And I'm
Mm,
here today with the lovely Kristin Dwyer. Would
yes,
you like to
yeah.
introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kristin Dwyer, and my debut novel, Some Mistakes Were Made, just came out on Tuesday. So,
Oh my God,
yay.
so exciting. You're a
Yes.
real novelist. It's out in the world. People can
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah. People are reading it and reviewing it and sending me
How's that?
messages. Well, I feel like I constantly need to hydrate because people will send me these messages and like I'm sure you experienced something similar where people are like, I just really connected with this. And then it's like this long paragraph of like this deep emotional content, and you're like, ah! So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
Lots of hydration needing to happen. Am I fuzzy again?
No, you're not, I
Okay,
promise.
because now you're fuzzy. Okay.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it is an interesting, like, I always think it's very bizarre the idea of writing, right? Because we're putting, especially when you're writing stuff like we write, and it's like
Yeah.
very personal and emotional, and we put it out in the world, and people
Yeah.
inevitably read it. And
Hmm.
it's such a conversation between like the writer and the reader. And hearing what people really connect with is sometimes fascinating because it's not
Yeah.
always what you would think it would be.
Yeah.
Of this house. I don't. You can ask Goo. Sorry. There was a little mishap with when people were going to be home to take care. Okay, try playing a different game. Hold on 1 second.
Um, anyways, I actually have a bunch of questions for Dante because I am a really, really big fan of Dante's writing. And I actually find it really fascinating that both Dante and I would tell people that we are funny, happy,
Yes,
charming people, and we write
yes.
really sad crap.
Why are we writing sad stuff? Like
I
I think I have a theory,
Okay,
which
go ahead. Sure.
because I'm gonna get deep. Okay.
Okay, I'm
We're
ready.
both Enneagram sevens. So if you don't know what
True.
the Enneagram, it is a personality type um, test that you can take, and it all has to do with like your childhood wound,
Mhm.
which makes it great for character building. But the thing
Yeah.
about sevens is that we really try to distract ourselves from feeling anything sad. Um, and so a lot of times it comes off that we are kind of flippant or a little aloof when we're not. We are just choosing to ignore those feelings and like can get like uncomfortable when other people are like down. And so we're like,
Yeah.
okay, that person's down. That doesn't look fun. I'm going to make it fun. Okay.
Yes.
But a lot of times people think that sevens aren't very deep people or very
Yeah.
emotional people, but we really are very deeply emotional people. We just don't access it the same way. And it comes
Yeah.
out in opportune times. Like, I don't know, working out at the gym and you just can't stop crying. I hate this. Like, why am I like, and then my dog died, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
That was years ago. Like,
Yeah.
we're not upset about that anymore. So I think sevens in general, I think we are very apt to like appear happy, but
Mm.
inside we are holding a lot in. And so I think that writing
Yeah.
the type of books that we write are a great way to access those feelings. And it's safer to express them that way than it is
Mhm.
to tell someone, I feel really bad right now.
Yeah. 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 I would agree with that. Do you want to pitch Message Not Found? Do you want to like
Oh,
give it a little
sure.
pitch? Okay.
Yeah. So Message Not Found is about a girl who uses a chatbot when her best friend dies unexpectedly. And the chatbot kind of reveals that there was a secret that she didn't know about. And so she acquires some more chatbot food unethically and sets out to determine what this secret her friend was keeping. You know,
I find this to be unbelievably fascinating, like the concept of this book, and I think that you executed it extremely well. But I find the entire thing like to be such a social commentary on kind of like how we let go and the lengths we will continue to go to in grief and things like that. So I thought the book was like it's a page turner. You just flip through it. It's so good. It pulls your attention immediately, but then you're left with all of these things at the end of the book where you're like, I feel like there were so many things that were like comments on the human condition, which I find always to be the best books when you walk away and you feel like you've learned a little bit about your own humanity. You know what I'm saying? So I really wanted to know where you like got this idea, where this came from.
Well, so my grandpa, this is kind of a weird, like convoluted story, but my grandpa, I was his caregiver at the end of his life, and his last words to me were, "I'll text you." And man had a flip phone. He never texted a day in his life. He hated it. And I was like, "What did you say?" And he was like, "I'll text you. One day you'll get a bunch of gobbledygook in your phone and it'll be me." And then literally the last thing the man ever said to me, "Okay, all right, but I'm talking right now and it's important. Thank you. Won't talk to me for hours. Like that wants nothing to do with me until I can't."
I got 4 too. Okay.
Oh, I know you get it. Esther will let you. Okay. 1 second.
So should I sing? I don't know.
Sorry. Anyway, so he's like, "I'll text you." And I was like, okay, that was weird. And I didn't think much of it. It's like one of those things that people say. And then a few months later, I was donating, I think it was this van, and they came and picked it up. And I got a text that was unknown sender, and then it just said message not found. And then I was like, that's kind of weird. But then it kept happening. So like the day that the Truth Project sold, it happened again. And we had an earthquake and it happened again. And so it was just this weird like thing that would happen. And whether or not like logically, right? I'm a logical person. I know that it's like a mess in some system. Like it's a glitch, right? It's not actually my grandpa, but it still makes me feel connected to him. And it was this idea of like what I wanted, like I wanted to explore something around technology and grief and how we kind of use technology to handle our grief and whatnot. But then I read this article about someone who used a chatbot to connect with her dead best friend. And she is the creator of Replica, which is, you see it. Yeah. So you've seen it around. It's, you know, a chatbot that you can talk to and can be your friend or lover. But it's just this interesting thing that like is accessible and people are doing it. Microsoft has the patent on this specific technology of using someone's digital imprint to create their likeness. And it's equal parts like the idea of like what we leave behind too. Like what are the pieces of us that are left behind on the internet for everyone to see? When you die, that's it. Like stopping point. This is who you are. Same with the internet. What you show the internet is who you are. So this idea of like you are what you leave behind on the internet versus you are what you are, right? Who you are. And so that is how I kind of came up with the idea. But yeah.
That's such a cool concept.
Thank you. I want to turn it back on you though, because for a long time, you and I have been chatting about writing, and we have both been in the boat of like, this is what we want. Like, let's get there. And a long road, like long road.
Yeah.
You have always written fantasy.
Yeah.
And I think it's clear in your writing though, because one of the things I love about fantasy, I always say contemporary is like popcorn. Like you can just like gobble it up. But fantasy is like a decadent chocolate cake that you need like a moment to sit down and like digest, because it's so floral. It's so like I'm trying to think of it's just different, right? It's like a different,
Totally. It's very rich, you know,
a
where
different
probably
muscle,
you can
right?
snack on. Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it like to transition from writing fantasy into writing something that was contemporary, and also writing something that was like so like heavy on the emotional side? Like
Yeah.
there's a difference too between like writing a contemporary that's like a rom-com and something that's
Yeah.
funny and cute,
Yeah.
which is still great and fun and enjoyable. Oh my gosh.
Right.
But like heavy, like putting yourself
Yeah.
there.
Right. Well, I think that you'll probably understand this probably more so than anybody else, but like the thing that I loved about fantasy and I loved about speculative fiction and in general is that the stakes are so high, right? They're always the end of the world or somebody's death or
Yeah.
like some kind of like life
Yes.
stakes, right? And that the emotions that come with that, like the tension that you pull out when the stakes are that high, and like you can't get that in contemporary. You can't like it's save the banana stand, you know, and it's this girl trying to save her like parents' shop or something, or like, you know, she wants to get into college or whatever. The other side of that, like as an adult, I have a really hard time connecting with those being life and death stakes, right? Like those being that like really intense stakes. And so I'm like, I have to write fantasy because I want to write these really intense books, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Yeah.
I'm not trying to write the fluffy rom-com. And I love a fluffy rom-com. I am not throwing shade at them. I can't write them. And so I was at Y'all Fest and Cami Garcia was on a panel and she was talking about how fantasy was so incredibly easy to write, but then she wrote a contemporary and her contemporary was like bloodletting. And I like laughed and I was like, oh, Cami's so silly. Stupid Cami. And then I went back to my Airbnb with all of the people that I was staying with that were all fantasy writers. And I was like, did you guys hear Cami? Like, how ridiculous is she? And they all looked at me and they were like, are you being serious right now? Because that's not real. Like contemporary is incredibly hard. Like if something goes wrong, you can't just like add a dragon. And I was like, what dragon? Like,
And now I'm like, oh my God, if I wrote fantasy, I could add a dragon.
yeah. Like, and so I'm like, what? But so anyways, I was like, I don't know. Contemporary always came really easy to me. It was something that was always easy. Fantasy was always something I had to work at because I don't care about world building at all. They can be in a white room. All I care about is feelings. I want to talk about feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, people that write fantasy really care about world building.
Yeah, that's like very essential.
It incredibly essential. It like plays into the plot, the vibe, that like your atmosphere is a huge thing. And I'm like, who needs atmosphere when we have vibes and feelings, right? Like my goal is a Taylor Swift song. That's all I want to do. I like want to provide you angst.
Yes.
And when I realized that I could write something that wasn't a comedy, like, you know, I could write like sad bullshit. And there was a market for it, right? You know, there's a market for books that make you cry. I don't know if you know this, Dante, because you are like not active on TikTok, but like people like sad books.
Yeah. Yeah. People really enjoy it when you heard them. There was one TikTok where someone was like, the opening line she uses in the video is you expletive regarding my book. And at first I thought she meant me. And I was like, oh, like, I don't know how to feel, like intense feeling involved in this woman's video. And I said, is she talking about me? And then the next second she's talking about the character. And so it's like, oh, that's better. And then I was like, oh,
I'm going to be worried.
Is it better? I kind of feel bad now, kind of.
A little bad. That's fine. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I set out to make people cry, right? I mean, do you set out to make people
cry?
I
absolutely set out to people cry. Like I want people to cry. I'm like, okay. And you know, Deborah Crossland.
Yes.
Like I know that I have done my job when I send her pages and she is like, I hate you. That's like I just hate you. Like, I can't believe this. Like, you're making me cry. I don't know. I think there's something really beautiful about being able to like share something so incredibly personal or shared something that I'm like so proud of.
Yeah.
And like feelings that I'm accessing from somewhere, right? Like we're not writing
Yeah.
these things because we're feelingless. We write these
Yeah.
things because we have a lot of feelings and it's just not always comfortable to like share it. But
Yeah.
when you share those feelings and other people connect with it and they're like, this wrecked me, I'm like, yeah, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. I did it. Yeah. I did not. I did not
And try
cut
your
out.
own.
Yeah.
Really?
No, I
Oh,
didn't. I was trying to tell a romance. I'm like, I just wanna like in the early 2000s, there were all these like really great contemporary romances that were like super angsty. Sarah Dessen, like that kind of stuff. And I'm like,
oh,
I just want to write a Sarah Dessen novel, like, or
yeah,
not, but like, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
I, I just want Colleen Hoover, like I want the greats.
yep,
I want to write these
yeah.
angsty books. And in my mind, the things that make people cry were just ways that I could reinforce that Ellis and Easton weren't together. Like I was just trying to make it believable that these two people weren't together. And so much of my own worldview showed up on the page. And I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
now
a whole
that, yeah, now that it's out there, now I'm like, I don't know that I could ever go back to not sharing the way that I see the world on the page because
yes.
it feels incredibly validating, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So weird.
Well, also like this idea of like not only sharing worldview, but like you leave behind pieces of yourself in writing. Like whether you intend to or not, there are things that
Yeah.
like people will pick up. I'm sure you run into this. Like people will pick up something and they'll say like, "Oh, this one passage, that's such a you thing to say." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Whoops. Like I wasn't meaning to, but I did." I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just I wonder if it's the same way for fantasy writers because like it's a little different with contemporary because you can use like common speak, you
Mm.
know, but with fantasy it's a little bit different.
I
I don't
think
know.
that I think everybody I've talked to in fantasy, and I definitely don't put words in people's mouth, but I'm absolutely going to.
Yeah,
I feel like they always
that's
say that there are elements that they're connecting with,
yeah.
unlike us, where we're actually connecting with like literal things on the page, right? Like
Mhm.
people always say, like, "Oh, you're so much like this character," but that's not the character that I connected with the most, right? Like, "Oh, you're a Tucker," and I'm like, but I always felt like when I was writing, I was a Sandry, because I'm an adult now. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Who
I
did
get that.
who did you connect with in your book?
Um, so I feel like I'm trying to think. So in the Truth Project, I connected so much with Sana. Like that was
Um,
my like
yeah.
she's the best friend character.
Yeah.
Like that's me.
Yeah.
Uh, that's me. But in Message Not Found, it was a little bit different because the way it was like the Truth Project was like I vomited that book out. It happened so fast. It sold
Mm,
so fast. Everything happened so quickly. But with Message Not Found, it was like a process. It was like pulling
mm.
teeth to get that book out of me. And at first, sorry, I'm reading this comment and someone is saying, we all know the secret of Kristin's begorgeous hair is the salty spray of readers' tears. I think that needs to be like framed, that quote right there.
Yeah, did you see the one above it from Gretchen that says, "Yeah, I did tombstones of readers everywhere."
Yeah. No, it's like the best feeling to make someone cry. Like I say that like that's a terrible thing to say, but also
Yeah, like I think it's validating that like the work that you put in touched somebody. That's
yeah.
what it is. I mean, if you didn't cry, that's okay too.
Oh my gosh, we have questions.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to do them?
Yeah, yeah,
Hold on,
yes.
hold on. I'm just gonna see if I can. Okay, Kristin, how do you think watching the Brotherhood of BTS affect your portrayal of the Brotherhood in SMW? And Dante, what is the hardest part of writing Message Not Found?
You go first.
The hardest part of writing Message Not Found was writing Message Not Found. Um,
Book 2.
honestly, a lot like the hardest parts of writing, I think, are always uh, making the thing you want to say work with the plot. So,
Mm,
like, trying to find the connective tissue between the characters' feelings
Yeah.
and what's happening on the page. Plot comes easy to me. The
Mm,
feelings for me, like plot is like super easy. I write that out first, and then the characters' personalities and their character arc change throughout. Um, but I think, sitting in a space of grief for that long takes its toll
mm,
on you emotionally. And
yeah.
I think you probably agree with that, Kristin. It's really
Mm,
hard sometimes to put yourself in a space of like intense, like sadness
mhm.
every day for months to write a book.
Yeah.
That's hard. And then to
Yeah.
have to edit it and go back to those feelings.
Yeah.
And I've shared a bit about the fact that, like, my biggest final revision came when my dad was sick. And so I just shoved myself into the book instead of focusing on like what was actually going on.
Mm,
And that, like, now when I read it or read passages, it's like almost like a journal or like
yeah.
a memory. So that's, in
Oh,
hindsight, kind of weird for
mhm.
me to like read through it. I'm like, oh, I feel like maybe I shouldn't have put that in a book because now
Yeah.
it's going to be out there forever. But also, when I get an email from someone or like a DM from someone saying that they lost someone and they
Yeah.
felt like connected for them, I'm like, okay, no, that was the right thing to do. Like, share that because it makes people feel seen. It makes people
Yeah.
feel like they're not alone.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that. Yeah. I always feel like the hard part for me in writing is connecting with my character's pain and then sustaining being connected to that pain. Because characters come from like like whatever our shared trauma is. I don't
Yes.
like have all the same trauma as my characters, but like whatever our shared pain is, then I have to like I'm
Mhm.
connected with that character, and I'm like, oh my
And
gosh.
we are seven, so we want to
Yeah.
avoid that pain. And so, like,
Mhm.
it's almost like opening a cut every time you open your
Yeah.
manuscript. You're like, oh, here we are. That
Yeah.
thing I don't like to think about. That thing that I think about every 6 years because I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't get back to sleep. And I'm like, ooh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
That is the feeling of writing every day. Be a writer. It's fun, they say.
So great. So great. Yeah, my question was about the Brotherhood of BTS and if it influenced
Oh,
the Aubrey brothers, which
oh.
are the family of boys that Ellis, my main character, gets connected with, and kind of they become her like surrogate family. And yeah, I mean, I think it would be impossible to say that they didn't. That I I really enjoy. I'm going to sit on my
Do you like
soapbox.
BTS? Is that something
No one's
you enjoy?
ever even brought that up to me. I don't even know who they are. Um,
Oh,
No. I'm kidding. I love BTS. The in K-drama, they do this really great thing where they focus on characters and each character, whatever the connection is with another character, it's not just the romance, but it's always this like relationship that matters, right? So like they're big on romance, always really big on romance. And hi. And I love that. I love that they treat each relationship as if it's just as important as the romance. And so these boys, I wanted them not to only have important relationships with Ellis, but with each other. And you can see like just brotherhood in things like BTS, where these 7 boys are roughly the same age and they're all doing this thing together, growing up together, and it's very inspiring to watch people that are loyal and love each other, but also like give each other a really hard time all the time and are like want the best for each other, but also really want to destroy you sometimes, like
family.
yeah, family. It is family. And so I definitely think that BTS is always going to have a major impact on me forever. So, and
How did
K-drama.
you
I love K-drama.
how did you get into like K-pop and K-dramas?
Like 2010, I started listening to
How?
K.
Oh,
I actually found them online, and they're so like K-pop is this like completely overproduced like it's nothing like it's kind of like what American boy bands were like in the 90s, these really
mhm.
visual videos, these like really catchy songs, dances that you do along with the members. You know all their names. Everybody's got a very unique personality. So I've always loved boy bands, like New Kids on the Block. Like I was like, way back in the day, Jodeci, like, New Edition. I was all about boy bands my whole life. I've been this way. I loved One Direction. I will never apologize for that. Harry Styles is still, I will never. So Harry Styles is still my husband, And so I found K-pop and was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And then the West found K-pop. And I was like, oh my God. And now it's like this huge thing. Yes. Do you know BTS? And so
did you discover K-pop? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm the founder of not even close. And I think actually it was like somebody from BuzzFeed that shared something that, because I had like listened to some K-pop and then I kind of went away. And then Eugene from the Try Guys did like this series on like the Korean wave in like 2013, 2014. And I was like, all right, I'm back. And like totally reignited this like passion. And I tried to hide it for many, many years. And because I had no friends, no one loved it but me. I was by myself alone. Adrienne wanted nothing to do with it. She was like over my dead body. And then like slowly I, found my people and I'm like, they're my family. They're my BTS family. So
I love it.
It's normal. It's normal. This is normal.
It is normal. Totally normal.
Gretchen, do you know BTS? Yeah. So do you.
Yeah, they've met. Yeah. Okay. When writing something hard for the characters, how do you push through and write it? I struggle with knowing I have to hurt my fictional friends, so I've been avoiding tough scenes. Your turn to go first.
Man, it's rough. Like knowing that you're gonna kill somebody or hurt somebody or do the hard thing. Yeah, I actually don't have a lot of really good advice for this. Do you have any good advice? I'm always like,
so I always have like, I actually don't mind doing like, I get psyched to do those scenes because I'm like, those are the good scenes. Like those are the ones like that I'm psyched to write, that I'm excited to see play out. There's usually one scene or piece, right? Because of the way I write, there's like different artifacts kind of throughout the book, and there's usually like one section that is always like super hard for me. With Message Not Found, or with the Truth Project, it was the poem at the end, and with Message Not Found, it's a letter. And I always save it. It's my last revision every time. I just skip it until it's like the last thing I have to do. So I would say skip it until you have to deal with it. Like most things in life, avoid until you deal with it.
Yeah. I feel like in story, if you don't hurt your character, if you don't give them that pain, then the juxtaposition of your happy ending, if you have one, or your bittersweet ending, you don't earn it as much. So when you're providing that tension and that you're doing those awful things to your character, and you're, whatever, even if they're the ones that don't make it, what you're doing really is creating that tension so that when you get to your climax, you've earned that climax. And so when I think about it like that, and when I think about tension, and I remember somebody once told me, however far you think you need to go with tension, you need to go farther. When I think about those things and how this awful thing is going to provide that additional tension, which will help me earn the moment that I'm so excited about, which is whatever my climax is, especially if it's romance, it's always like the kiss scene, the sex scene, whatever it is, like you want to earn that. And so you can't do that unless you're mean. And so I'm always like, okay, well, it's like working out. Like I have to do it if I want to. I don't know. I don't work out, so I don't know why I use that example. It's like, I don't know, diets. I don't know. I don't do that either. So I don't know. I know.
That's interesting though, because like it's the whole idea of like tension on every page. Like there needs to be something going on. Otherwise, why do you care about what toast they had that morning?
Yeah.
There has to be something else moving things.
Right.
That's the like Donald Mash trick. Like what can make this situation worse? What can make it so what can make it so bad you can't possibly come back from it? And then do that. Make them do that. And then because that's like, haven't we all read that book though, where we're like, oh my God, like, how are they going? Like, there's no way to come back from this. I remember, did you ever play Life is Strange? Do you ever play video games?
Not that
Okay.
one, no.
Okay, so I don't think it's the first Life is Strange, but in one of them, there's a situation where like something happens and a character like loses an eye or something. And I remember being like, you can't take his eye. Like, he needs his eye.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like upset for the character and being
Yeah.
like, well, what are we going to do now? Like, these kids are trapped, these two kids in a road trip. Like, there's just this kid and his little brother. Their parents are deadbeats. Now he doesn't have an eye. He's trapped in the hospital. He needs to get his little brother. Like, what are we going to do? And I remember feeling like, as if it wasn't hard enough for this kid.
Right.
Now we're just going to throw like all these new things at him. I don't know. Like,
Veronica Roth did that. She did that in Divergent. One of the characters gets stabbed in the eye while they're sleeping, and it's like a good character, and like they're kind, and they get stabbed in the eye by like the evil person that doesn't get kicked out, but this person who now is missing an eye gets kicked out, and you're like, this is unfair. This is awful. Like, all of these things are the worst, and like, how could you do this to this character? And all she did was ratchet up all of the stakes of that. So, and it was awful. And I was just like, Triss has got to get out of there. Like, she's got to save herself.
In a moment. What is the book that you feel like was there a book that made you feel like I could do this?
I when I read Twilight, I was like, I want to be a writer. I want to do this. I want to put emotion on the page. But the book that like really inspired me to write like this, I mean, if you've read The Summer I Turned Pretty, you will see that the vibe kind of is similar.
Yeah.
And I loved that book. I loved it. And I thought I wanted to do that, something that felt quieter, but that you are, will they, won't they, the entire time. So
are you excited for the show?
Oh, unbelievably excited. Unbelievably excited. Yeah. So nothing. Yeah.
A little bit. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. Just chime in. Otherwise, Kristin and I are just going to continue to embarrass ourselves. Is there anything in the book that you're embarrassed about? That, like, a scene where you're like, oh, yeah.
No.
Okay, if you had to read any scene out loud, is there any scene you wouldn't want to read out loud?
Listen, so Shelby Mahurin is a good friend of mine. She has all of these sex scenes in her book, and she's always horrified when people read them out loud. And I'm like, I will read my sex scenes out loud. I don't care. In fact, I did it. I read them out loud to Rebecca Ross the other day because I was like, here, something like this. And I'm like, let me pull up my work for you. And she was like, how can you just read that out loud? And I'm like, none of it embarrasses me. I just lean in. I'm like, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
I can't. There's no way. I can't. It's funny though, because like sometimes my mom will be like, oh yeah, I saw you talked about this one book. And my mom is like very like straight-laced, like prim and proper. And my friend Vanessa wrote
Turning Point.
And I don't know if you've read it, but there's a scene in there on a washing machine.
Yeah. I haven't read it, but I've heard it.
Second, my mom was like, I'm reading Vanessa's book. I was like, oh.
Skip chapter 42.
Okay. All right. I don't know how to feel about that. Moms are women too. Yes, I agree. That is true. But my mom is like, I love her so much.
Yeah.
I would say this in front of her, so it's not talking bad about her. She's the kind of person who laughs at a dirty joke, not because she thinks it's funny, but because she's like, I don't get it. Like, what do you mean? So it's like very, very sweet. And I'm like, I'm so nervous for her to read this. Rachel asked, what is next for both of us? Oh my gosh, now there's a lot more questions. Okay, what is next for both of us? Dante, will you write an inverse novel again? I love the truth. Thank you so much. What's next for me? Well, I'm gonna shower after this, and then probably make dinner. I, like most things, can't talk about anything that's next yet. But
Really?
I'm working on a few things, so we'll see. We'll see what happens. How about you, Kristin? What's next for you?
I'm obviously writing my second book in hell. So it's
Yeah.
great. But I also, when I'm sad and about book 2, I'm working on an adult novel, trying to do that. I want to try to finish that by the end of the year.
Same. I also
So
want to write something adult. As far as verse novels, I would love to write another verse novel if there was like for verse, I feel like it needs to be in verse to make it a verse novel. Like it's one of those things that I felt like with Cordelia, I really wanted to exercise the fact that she was like a 4, like an Enneagram 4, and she felt things differently than other people. And I think that verse let me access that in a different way than I would have been if it had been in prose, which is why it ended up being in verse. But I would love to do something like that again. I loved writing in verse. I felt like it felt a lot freer to write in verse, like to have, I don't know, I guess just be like over the top with emotions, but it would have to be the right project. Anna wants to know if you have any next book hints.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. No, I am writing a book about 5 kids who are at a community service project work camp in the Sierra Nevadas for a summer, and they are bad kids, and it's kind of my way to explore what is bad kid, what is a kid who lies look like, what if you're constantly lying about things, what are the things that you cannot lie about that you just tell the truth about, what does the truth look like, that kind of stuff. So
Gretchen wants to know if it's sad, sexy.
It's always going to be sad, sexy, Gretchen. You know better. You know that that's what's happening.
Oh, you know what you did.
Yeah.
For on my side, hints. I mean, I would say there's technology involved. Always grief kissing, and it's set in Alaska because I don't know how to write anything set anywhere else. I just, if I can't look outside and find inspiration, well, it's not going to happen. Although I do, yeah, I would like to write something set somewhere else at some point, but right now it's just enjoying this. How do you carve out space for your writing, especially when you first started? Ooh, how do you carve that space out, Kristin?
I just treated it like it was a job, and I just sat down and did it. There's also a book called Deep Work. I don't know if anybody's read that, but it will change the way that you view productivity. And as a 7, I was like, I do what I want. You're not the boss of me. But the more research I did, the more I was like, I really need this book. And it talks a lot about like what productivity really looks like and how we thrust like expectations on ourselves and actually, yep, see, Becca knows it. And it like actually really impacts our work. And so I try to be very like conscious of like, I have 2 to 3 hours a day where I can actually get some shit done. And then the rest of that, I need to find other ways to be productive. But so I do treat it like it's a job. And then I also give myself a lot of leeway too with it and be like, okay, this is who I am. And how do I fit inside of being productive instead of like, you know, Jessica and Billy and Tommy, they all, you know, work best this way. And I'm like, schedules, yeah, good for them. Schedules are the worst and I refuse. So
schedules are the worst. Also, I think the challenge of having and doing this with a large number of children under you is a challenge.
Yeah.
Like for me, I know that having young kids, because you have older kids.
Yeah, my youngest is 9 now. My oldest is 21.
Okay. So my youngest is 4. And so I'm still in that. She obviously needs me still quite a bit. And so when I think about like carving out time, I know that once she wakes up, I am her snack slave.
Mhm.
And so I wake up stupid early when I'm drafting. Only when I'm drafting, I'll wake up at like 4 and work from 4 to 6 because I know those are 2 sacred hours where I will get so much done. Honestly, carving out space is part of it, but also like knowing who you are and knowing what works for you, because what works for one person won't work for someone else. I know plenty of people that would be like, there is no way I could write a functional sentence at 4 a.m., which I totally get. I can't write at like 10 p.m. I'm like, my brain is mush. I like am no longer functioning at that point.
Yeah, comparing yourself to other people is not great. I mean, there's a girl in this chat, Gretchen. She's a woman. She writes incredibly fast, and all my words would look like garbage if I wrote as fast as she does. Like she just can like bust out the words. And very early on, I was like, I am not Gretchen. I cannot write 4,000 words in an hour. So
what?
I think it was like 35 or something one time,
okay,
and I was
Gretchen,
just like,
I'd like you to put in the chat how many words per hour you're slamming out.
yeah.
Although I would say this, doing what is the word I'm looking for? Sprints.
Oh yeah.
I think are super helpful, because if I say I'm going to write for 2 hours, that's exhausting. But if I say I'm going to write for 20 minutes and then give myself a 5-minute break, I'm like hammering out words like crazy.
Yeah.
That is. How do you convey emotion on the page in a way that feels true and honest without being melodramatic or over the top?
If you believed it, I don't know what I did. Like, like you tell me, Kate.
Okay, so I think honestly, part of it is not using like, I don't know, just like being honest, right? Like we all have moments of like vulnerability. And so if you're honest with the words, then it's going to feel honest. But if you're like over the top and ridiculous with the words and like trying to be dramatic or trying to be a big emotion, that's different. Right. I think a lot of times less is more. And a lot of times what is not said is just as important as is what is said.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Like,
yeah.
Being intentional. And I feel like one mistake I used to make a lot was like letting the scene go on a little bit too long, like needing like closure in a scene. And I think some of the best and most impactful scenes are the ones that just stop and you're like, oh, like that moment, like that was a big thing to say. What happens after? Well, I don't know. Just let the moment.
What's that quote that's like the right word is the difference between a light bulb and lightning? You know, like it's the right word makes all of the difference. Like finding the ones that are supposed to be on the page. And I think that readers are incredibly intelligent, and they can tell when you're trying to manipulate them. Yes. I mean, I know that I can as a reader, and I'm like, you're doing this on purpose. But when you put something on the page that you as a writer feel, that's worth everything right there. Like a reader can tell. And that's how I try to do it. If I don't feel it, I don't force it. So
no, I agree. Like forcing it only comes across as like, silly. Okay, we answered that one. What books did you read to inspire your current books as inspiration?
That's an interesting question for you, Dante, because I don't feel like there's anything like your book out there.
Well, I mean, there are in other ways. So I just did a thing for tour.com. Hold on just a second. Yes, I can. That talks about like the intersection of technology and grief and like books that tackle that. Adam Silvera does a really great job of that.
Who's Adam Silvera? I've never even heard of him.
But the idea of like touching on grief and how technology impacts it. There are some books I try really hard to avoid books that feel too similar. So I don't really do research in that way. For me, research is more like, so for format is where I like to like flex and play. And some of the books that have inspired me are like Nicola Yoon's Everything. I found that just like the short choppy chapters, the little artifacts, I felt were so brilliantly done. There's a few like books that are written completely in text message. I Hate Everyone But You by Gabby Dunn and Allison Raskin that came out a few years ago. And I think they had a second one after that. And I'm just looking at my bookshelf. The Princess Diaries was a huge influence for me. And Meg Cabot wrote an entire like adult like rom-com series.
I read all those.
Yep. With like written through interoffice emails.
Yes.
And
they're so smart.
Those up. I was obsessed with them. But there's something very voyeuristic about reading an email. Like you shouldn't. Yes. Boy Meets Girl, something like that. Yeah. But there's something about it that felt so voyeuristic. Like I shouldn't be reading it because it's someone else's private email to someone else, that I still like hold on to that feeling. And I love writing in that space. And I want when someone picks up one of my books to feel like they're getting information they shouldn't have. Like they're reading someone's text, their emails, or their poetry, like something a little bit nutty, their Google search. Like, I'd be mortified if someone looked through my Google searches. I'm sorry. Like, take my text messages, like blast those. Do not look at my Google. Do not come for my Google search.
My Google search, they'd be like, does she know how to spell anything? No, she doesn't. She absolutely doesn't. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. I loved those books because I think there's like an intimacy too in shared missives like that. Like when you're like text messaging or email or anything like that, it like almost removes a barrier in real life because you cannot, so much of our communication is done non-verbally, right? Like you go off so many non-verbal cues in social situations. You can't do that in a letter or whatever. And so I find things like that to be even more intimate because your words matter. So
also it's a moment to be able to like character build as well, because someone is going to text their boss differently than they'll text their best friend or their crush. Parent. Like you have a chance to play with what someone is saying, and again, what someone is not saying. So you can find out in one chapter. I mean, there's a scene very early in the Truth Project where the main character Cordelia is having a text message back and forth with her friend, and she's talking about the fact that her best friend has like they want to be paired up for their senior project. Cool, but like very early on you find out that she actually requested to be with someone else, and there's this whole like thing. Yes, as soon as I'm done, I'm almost done.
What did
you read?
Listen, and this is like legitimate. Fan fiction is always like my go-to, because when I was trying to write contemporary, and I was like, the things that I love in contemporary are the emotions. And in fan fiction, you don't have to character build. A good friend of mine, Alex, is always saying like it's almost like the dress has already been kind of like the pattern for the dress is already there. So you don't have to do any characterization. You don't have to world build really. People go in assuming that they already know these characters. So what you're doing is you're relying 100% on emotion and really conveying that to the reader. And that's how you get people in fan fiction, is 100% the emotion that you're dropping them into. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to take a reader with original characters and drop them into an emotion, and hopefully then believe me and trust me enough that they will continue reading all the way through. And I learned all of that by reading an obscene amount of fan fiction. So
what is your favorite type of fan fiction? Like, what is your favorite fandom to read in?
I have a few fandoms that I read in, but I mean, I think it's pretty obvious the fandoms that I read in. So I got really into in the early 2000s. I was reading a lot of like, yeah, I would read anything. I read a lot of Twilight, a lot of Harry Potter, you know, the usuals. And then now I've moved on to a pretty apparent fandom.
X-Files.
Yeah, no.
Twilight. I loved Twilight.
Me too.
Do you think you have to have a CP to be successful?
You know, I don't know if anybody likes Shay Earnshaw's books, but she actually does not have a critique partner, and nobody reads her stuff until it goes to her editor. And I find that
Jenna Evans Welch.
Yeah, I don't think Jenna has one either.
And I'm like, how do you not?
Who tells you you've done a good job? And they're like, my editor. And I actually think they have the same editor. I think they both have Jenna? Nicole. No, Shay and Jenna, because they're both at SNS, and I think they both have Nicole as their editor.
That's funny. No, I agree. I find that fascinating. Like, who do you send sentences to get the good job? Keep going.
Yeah.
Like,
you just know
fuel off of getting like external validation. Like, I really love when someone tells me something I wrote was pretty.
You just like in your gut, you have a you have a feeling?
No. Yeah, no. That's wild. Like, listen, I think that depends author to author too. Like,
I do too.
Some people are better writers than me.
Well, and I think people need critique partners at different stages. Like, I send everything to my critique partner as I write it, because I don't want to go into the weeds, and she sends me everything as she writes it. I have another friend who will, the way I critique for, I only critique at the end when she's completely finished, because she writes 18 different versions until she's happy, and then she sends it to a critique partner. Yeah, her process is bonkers. Like, she will lay out these index cards with a plot on it, like a plot point, and then write the next 5 things that could possibly happen. And then from there, 5 things that could possibly happen to those 5 things. And then, so it's like this huge spider web that she's writing.
Like, create your own adventure.
Yes, like, but for her own brain.
Book.
Right. And then because she's constantly trying to, oh yeah, that is Stephanie Garber. It is. I was trying to be quiet.
Oh my God.
Yes, but because she wants to do the thing that is the most surprising to herself. So she's constantly trying to figure out what is the most surprising thing that could happen. That's why when you read her books, you're like, what?
Yeah.
Now they're doing this, you know? Yeah.
That is wild. With
it is kind of ingenious, Gretchen.
Gosh, now I'm just thinking about that. That's wild. That is like terrifying. So Deb and I will share, like, we talk through a lot of things. We talk through a lot of things as we're writing, as we're even thinking about the idea for a book. We're bouncing ideas back and forth off of each other. And then we will start critiquing from like the plot. Like, we'll write out our plots, our outline, and share those back and forth and critique those. So again, I think it's just different. Obviously, there's more than one way to write a book. Yeah. There's also more than one way to like get published. So, also, what is successful? I don't even know. What does that mean?
Who knows? If you know, let me know.
Yeah.
So,
put it in the comment. Both of you have tapped into the voice. How did you find that as a writer, and how do you tap into it for every project? Ooh.
I feel like voice is really one of those things that is almost unteachable, and it takes a lot of trial and error. Like, yes. I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel like it took me so many different versions of writing something to figure out, like, oh, this is what I sound like, you know, because I would try on a lot of other people's voices for many, many years, and those books will never see the light of day. But I did sound a lot like a Sandra Clare, in case you were wondering. You know, I think that it takes a while to figure out your.
Yeah, I think it comes from also character building, like really knowing the character and really giving, like, I remember one time doing like a character worksheet, right? where you'll like find one and they're like, this is what I do before every book. And
Mm-hmm.
looking through, like, I don't really care how they take their coffee. Like, I don't think that's relevant. But in hindsight, I'm like, it kind of is, because those are things that are telling about a character, and having those things figured out ahead of time for me is very much so like again, and this doesn't come down to coffee, that's arbitrary, but when I'm discussing things like the way that character is fitting into their world, judging over black coffee, it's important to know these things because that's going to impact what that character sounds like. I a lot of times will, at the beginning of a project, I have to write the first chapter a few times just to get the voice. Like, I can't go further than that. The voice, I need to get the voice down and figure out whose story I'm telling before I can move forward.
We really do have such similar processes, Dante. Like, we really are very similar in a brain. So.
It's very eerie. It's terrifying.
Because we're Sagittarius too.
Oh, it's okay. It looks like she dropped it.
Well, we can call this Dante because it's been
an hour. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks so much for chatting with me and inviting me to this. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I will check just a second. Thank you for doing this as well. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for the wonderful questions. And I know there were more that we didn't get to, but Kristin and I are both on the internet all the time. So
really. Yes, thank you guys so much. All right, Dante.
Yes, we would love to come back again and pick up our books. Support. Or thank you so much for hosting. You guys are incredible. I'm gonna go take a shower.
Sounds great. All right. Bye.
Mwah.